Hey, all right, thank you ladies for being here. It's so fun to have a group of people together, so thank you. So I'm Alexis, Dr. Alexis Edwards. My background is in Chinese medicine, which is where the doctor piece comes from. I was a Chinese medicine practitioner for 16, 17 years, and now I teach metaphysics and I channel with being named Simon. I trance channel, and we do that also once a month and in all the places. And so today what we're doing is a spiritual real talk. And so it's this idea of like, the reason we call it real talk is to get beneath the surface of just the mundane, like the regular sort of thing. And today's topic is going to be on intuitive development. And so regardless of where we're at, which I'll ask you in a moment where you're at with your intuitive understanding, regardless, there's always another level of expansion with the way that we play with our intuition and the way that we understand ourselves and operate. So whether we use it just for ourselves or for others as well, or even like professionally, there's always more expansion is my understanding and my experience. So we'll do that, and we'll talk about how to identify your Clairs. We'll talk about the Clair abilities, which is the different psychic senses. And then at the end of that, we're going to go ahead and do something called your intuitive workshop. So this is like an inner workshop. I'll guide you through a meditation where you're going to be creating a sacred spiritual space inside your mind's eye that you can go back to time and time again. And so we make it so it's protected and clear, and it's very connected with you, right? So you kind of, it's personal, and I'm a big proponent of when we're going inside, it's also the pathway to lots of different ethers and lots of different traveling spaces. Like when we meditate, if you meditate long enough, you go all over the place. And so it's very important to me for each of us to become aware that anything is possible and not everything is what it says it is. So checking ID, having like spiritual, clear, protected space is important, and that's what the inner workshop does, is it helps you create a protected space for you to then interact with the unseen, which is super important. So this is a tool and a skill that if you like it, it's something that you can continue to play with and practice. When I was first taught it 20 years ago, I've continued to work with it and use it in all kinds of ways.
Were you afraid at first?
No, but I have a whole, I grew up in a household with a parent who, both my parents are particularly spiritually inclined, and one parent my dad is a spiritual practitioner of Santeria, which is an Afro-Cuban religion, and so I grew up around that, and so you see a lot of things, and so I think I kind of danced with fear when I was little around that stuff. So no, it was very normal. It wasn't just normal, it was very liberating to have a structured way of being able to connect and start to really like expand my gifts and my abilities. Cool. Yeah. So we'll start a little bit of where are we all at? Who would say that they're like beginner baby understanding of their intuition? Okay. Who would say, I agree. Who would say that you're moderate, you understand your intuition, you play with it a little bit, you listen some? Okay. Who would say that they have very good grasp of their intuition and understand the nudges, follow the nudges? And who would say they're at a level where they can incorporate it and are teaching it to others or using it professionally?
I live by my intuition.
Yeah.
There's no other way.
So you're at that higher end. Yeah, that's perfect.
I don't even think about it.
Yeah, I love it. Do you have an awareness of the way that it comes in?
Oh.
Yeah, awesome. And the Clairs that you,
yes,
yeah.
Completely clear.
Awesome, I love it, that's amazing. And Jani's kind of the same too, yeah? No?
You don't way down the lower end.
Oh gosh, that's not true, Jani.
Well, she intuitively knew she loved me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit, right? Let's talk about how we all have clairsenses. We're all intuitive. It's a different level. I have found that some people, were called upon and come into the earth to use it with other people. It's just all different walks. It's all beautiful and it's all perfect. Being able to discern what we're noticing is really important for our day-to-day, but it's really important for our health as well. A lot of times, especially right now, when there's an influx of energies period, like anybody that you ask that's even like mildly sensitive, And especially people who are more sensitive are aware that things are shifting. There's things on this planet that have never been here before. There's ways of, there's just energetic understandings and energies that are coming in, and also the earth is vibrating in a way that she's never vibrated before. So because all these things are true, it's extra important to be aware of what's going on for us and how to discern that. So we have our basics, right? We have our basics. We'll go over the Clairs really quickly. Do you understand Clairs a little bit? So,
First time I've heard that.
oh, okay. So there's some words. I find spirituality to be very interesting, and our connection to ourself very interesting, because we don't actually need words, but it can be a beautiful thing for some people to give language, just depending on our upbringing. Some people need the language because maybe they were pushed away from their understandings or separated from that, and other people just like, the little girl in the forest, just I know, and are fine with what, and are okay with that, so they don't need language. But some people need language. And so the clair senses, it's just like clairvoyance. So clairvoyance is clear seeing, clairaudience is clear hearing, claircognizance is clear knowing, clairsentience is clear feeling. So I want to speak to clairsentience really quickly, because different people teach this different ways. So clairsentience can be clear feeling in the sense of actually getting physical sensation on their body, or some people think of it clear feeling like an emotional feeling. It depends who you ask, how they define it. So that's the thing with all these words. If somebody ever talks to you about whether it's this topic or something else and it doesn't quite match, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
good. I was just thinking about what you were saying.
Oh, yeah.
My brain was going off on it.
Right? Mine does the same thing. Yeah, so if someone ever says something to you in conversation that doesn't match your understanding of it, definitely ask, so how would you define that? Like, how do you think about that? Because often the word is being used in a different way. I find that with channeling all the time, the word is used for everything, and it doesn't always mean what you think it means. It often doesn't mean the way I mean it. So it's always helpful for us to be like, which language are you speaking here? How do you mean this? How do you utilize it? And clairsentience is one of those. Some people cross it a little bit together with being an empath. I find it to be different. For me, being an empath is to actually feel another person's emotions, being an emotional chameleon. So you will, and what do chameleons do? They're next to the green thing, they're green. They're next to the red thing, they're red. They're taking it on as if it's theirs, and it isn't. It's the tree or the flower or the whatever. So that's my understanding. And then with clairsentience, if you think about it in terms of a feeling sense, it's going to be the noticing of the emotion. Doesn't necessarily need to be as if it's yours. So it'll come up differently.
Is that the same as you were just saying, how you feel it? Like,
yes,
it's happening to somebody else, but you feel it.
Yeah, so this is where you can have an extrapolation of the word. So clairsentience can be the clear feeling of, and which way do we mean? This is where we're asking,
Okay.
Which way do you mean? Is it the feeling? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm like asking a question.
Mm-hmm.
So is this mine or is this someone else's?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is this, yes.
Yep, and that's definitely what we want to be doing with the feeling sense. And honestly, with all of the clairs, asking if it's mine or if it's somebody else's is really helpful, because sometimes we're noticing a thought, so claircognizance, that isn't ours, and sometimes it isn't even anything for us to do anything with. We just noticed it, we picked it up. And that's where you're kind of a lot of these things all overlap with each other. So with the claircognizant piece, sometimes you're talking about telepathy, where you're actually telepathically communicating with someone else, or they're communicating with you, right? And so that's a really curious
so
thing.
much lately. It's
Has
been
it?
so crazy. It's
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
I didn't even ask the question and they're answering it for me. Whoa.
Yeah, because you're very clear on your intentionality.
Yes.
And
Pure, clear intent.
yes, and because you're like that with your personal life, you operate like that all the time. So then of course people can hear you. And they may not, so it's
hilarious.
But it's you transmitting,
That's
right?
cool.
Yeah. So sometimes a person will pick it up and will have an awareness and will send it back to you in here. So doing it, if you have a friend or someone that you can play with that, now it would be a really beautiful time to do that, to just play with.
Because they're hearing me. I don't know if I'm hearing then.
Yes.
What point?
Yeah, so that would be a really fun play.
Okay.
I want to do that.
I know, I was thinking the same thing.
I do that
I think
with
we're
my
heading
friends.
into
I have
that.
2 friends
That
that I do
season.
that
I
with.
think that season is upon us.
Yeah.
It's
It,
coming.
it is. I feel that way too. So if you can't hear what she said, she feels like the season is upon us, of being able to have that telepathy, have that telepathic connection. So if we're in a place where we're understanding, again, we're discerning where are we at, just like I asked everyone here, if you're listening to this, we're discerning where are we with our understandings of how we perceive information. Everybody perceives extrasensory information. Most of us are taught that we're either making it up, we're silly, it's our imagination, or it's just our thoughts. And claircognizance, which is clear knowing, right, is the number one clair. It's actually the most common clair, but it's also the number one clair that is easily dismissed by people because it is so easy. Oh, right? Oh, that's just a thought. Oh, that was just, oh, that's just that. And it's not. It's
Oh, yeah.
and it's
Pay
really
attention
easy.
now.
Yep, because our culture and our society teaches that, especially in the U.S., but most Western countries teach us that, right? So it's really starting to become aware. The first invitation is like, for those of you who are more of the beginner area, is what if I let it be true that I do notice more than just the mundane everyday physical life? What if that's true? And if it is, I wonder how I'm noticing it, right? And just start to be aware.
Certain things I just know. I don't know how I know them. I just know that I know them,
Yep.
and I don't question it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then next thing I know, what I knew is now known.
Yep. And it comes forward, right?
Yes, it comes
Mhm.
forward.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yep. That's claircognizance. Yeah. So the more you recognize that, the more you allow it to come forward. And this is where we start to play with, when we know what our primary one is, we play with that. When we feel solid, we start to play with the other ones and start to like, oh, I wonder what else, right? I wonder what else. So like music, songs, and people discount this all the time too. Or they'll say, oh my gosh, this is happening all the time. Well, what are you doing about it? Are you paying attention to it? Or like, oh, I wake up all the time at 4:44. Well, this is also a clear understanding. Right? This is the unseen communicating with us in some way. So it's ourselves it's, what are we noticing and what meaning are we placing with it? And as human,
Like what's trying to get our attention?
yes. Yeah, what is trying to get our
Yeah,
attention?
what you're saying. That's
Mhm.
good.
Mm-hmm. And the next piece of it is really like understanding as human beings that our mind wants to make a meaning to some things all the
Yes.
time. Our mind's job is to discern information and to put meaning to things, and then also to relay data to the rest of the system to keep us alive. This vessel is very delicate. Human vessels are very delicate, and they're subject to not continuing to live if we're not careful with them. Seriously, right? So because of that, the mind's part of its job is to keep us alive, quite frankly. And it communicates to our adrenal system. And this is an interesting side note piece, that when we're sensitive or we're becoming more sensitive and all of these sorts of things, looking at our adrenal health and looking at our endocrine system is very important, because it is going to be overtaxed, because it is receiving additional input from that is causing a fight or flight response, because the mind says, oh, we're receiving something, and it sends a message, and so it can pump out. So this is something that I have noticed absolutely happens with people as they become more sensitive.
So that's why I'm having all these nodules.
Could be. Tune into it,
Yeah.
right? So having healthcare and doing all that, we're not giving medical advice, but also being aware that there's so much. So this physical body is the conduit by which we're having our spiritual experiences. So this physical body has to respond to it. Please.
Well, I totally get what you just said, because on the 3rd of August, I got a rear-end impact accident, and I haven't been able to sleep for the whole month of August. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. every time, 3 a.m., 3 a.m., 3 a.m. Then I went to get some craniosacral work done, and he went straight for my adrenals, and he said, what's going on in your adrenals? And suddenly I woke up to the fact that I was a little child and I got in an accident, And I was deeply, not afraid, there's another word, I can't think of it. Afraid maybe is a good word. I wasn't scared, I was afraid, and I was crying, and I was told to stop crying and shut up. And so I was in this panic. They are angry at me for being hurt.
Yes.
And I can't tell anybody I'm hurt.
Yeah.
And I can't cry about it. And so I got to cry about it on my, he was really good with me.
Yeah.
And he let me work that through, that this little girl, when I was a little girl,
Yep.
this accident brought all that up.
Yeah. Yeah, and the impact of that, right? And if you think, I'm sure if you were to think about all of the instances in which, like, nope,
I don't tell people I'm sick. I don't tell anybody I have something wrong with me
Yeah.
because they're going to get
you're not
angry at me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's where your mind made it mean something, right? And stored it in a certain way.
A belief that didn't serve me.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I
this,
finally completed the cycle.
which is amazing. Congratulations. That's a
Thank
beautiful
you.
thing to move through.
I'd like to share that.
I'm
Thank you.
glad.
What you're talking about makes total sense to me.
Yeah. I'm glad. Yeah. Yeah. So, with being aware that our mind is going to want to observe patterns, it's going to want to put things in a certain order, it's going to want to make sense and make meaning of things. I'm I try to be a proponent of I wear rose-colored glasses proudly, and I have my whole life, and I will continue to this whole physical existence. It serves me well, and I believe that they are important. But saying that is also to say this awareness. So for me, when I have a thought, if it doesn't serve me, I don't apply that meaning to it. If it doesn't feel good in my body, like if it doesn't feel good in my soul and my heart, I believe our soul resides in every cell of our body. Okay, it's not just in the heart. It's not just. This is why science can't
Our
understand
mind is
consciousness.
throughout our entire body.
Exactly. Well, our consciousness is. I
Yes,
feel like
yes.
our mind is a tool, and this is also where we want to use discernment with the way people use words, right? Because in the 20s, like in the turn of the 20th century and in like the 1920s, 30s, there was this big push of spiritualism and like all of these sorts of things, and there's a lot of talk about the universal mind, and in the Kabbalah and all these things, it's the universal mind. What they mean is consciousness, not the mental tool mind that we say now. It's different things, right? So this is why we always want to use like, how do you mean that? What do you
Always be curious.
absolutely, so that you can be on the same page with people when we're talking about these subjects. But with the meaning that we're putting to things, so let's use, for example, our clairs. We got a little bit of an understanding of like, sound is going to be, we're just becoming aware. It could be feeling, it could be, some people actually get a rush of sensation. When we say the chills, that's clairsentience, right? And it's signaling something to us.
It always tells me I'm in the right place. Something went right.
Yes.
I do have that.
But that's allowing what you've done with that awareness is you put together that I have a sensation, and now in my encyclopedia of myself, I know that this means I'm in the right place because you've allowed that meaning. Now, some people can have that, and based on thoughts, upbringing, belief systems, whatever, and be like, oh, it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and this is where we really want to discern what's our foundation. Were we taught to hold ourselves with love? Were we taught that the things that we think and notice are meaningful? Do we believe that we are held in a universal sense? How safe do we feel that we are on like a consciousness level, not just physical,
That's good.
And so those things, when we're using those things as a foundational understanding of our intuition, because that's really important, because otherwise we don't know what to do with the things we're noticing. And if we don't know what to do with the things we're noticing, we might as well not notice at all, because then we get ourselves in a whole, whirlwind. Like when you ask me a question, like, well, why don't you answer first and then I'll tell you what I think afterward, which I think is really the way. Like, we can absolutely go to our cards, go to each other, go to a mentor, whoever, but we also want to ask ourselves like, oh, but what is this for me?
Yeah,
what am
does
I
it really,
feeling?
What does this feeling mean to me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then speaking to people who can reflect things back to you in a way that's not dogmatic and really open for your own discernment to be the ultimate discernment, because that's really what we're talking about, especially with intuitive development and understanding our clairs and understanding just how we walk intuitively. So we're understanding that we're receiving messages, and a lot, not just messages, but data. It's all data. Energy is just data. So what is the data I'm noticing? If I notice a smell that isn't actually physically there, what is it offering me? You know, what level of understanding? This is also going to be, we're going to then look at what abilities or skill set are part of my toolkit. So I channel. That's one of my abilities, right? I can do mediumship. I can speak to people who are former humans. I can do all that stuff, right? So it's all these pieces. So when I notice something, it's what is being activated within me. I'm noticing information, or any of my spiritual gifts being activated with these understandings. Because a lot of times we look at the clairs as those are the spiritual gifts, which it's part of it, but there's also this next piece, which is the part that we can become skilled with, right? So being able to receive information maybe through clear cognizance, so clear knowing. And maybe one of our gifts is to be able to clearly articulate that to another person. To be like, oh, I have something to tell you. Would it be all right for me to tell you? Because the gift there was recognizing that it isn't mine, recognizing it's for somebody else, recognizing that person's sovereignty, and that I am not just blurting it out and saying things without permission, right? I'm saying, oh, would it be all right? I think I have something to say to you. Would that be all right? You know, we're honoring all these pieces, and this is what's really important when we're looking at our abilities. So that would be a more skilled way to operate, you know, or a person that can lay hands on people because they can, you know, whatever it is, it's where are you at with that, and are you skilled with it, and how can you develop that skill more so that we can honor ourselves and what we came here to do, and also honor the sovereignty of all the beings that we're interacting with too, because that's really important. And when I speak about sovereignty, what I mean is in every individual and every consciousness is whole unto itself and doesn't have control over anything else other than itself. It doesn't have, like, I'm not sovereign over you, you know? And so we do that. This is a whole nother topic, so we'll probably leave that there, but I just wanted to say that part because it's important. So when we're looking at our intuition, it's really starting to notice what we're noticing. So felt sense, smell sense, the thoughts. The thoughts is a big one. The knowings is a big one, just because most of us, like I said before, a lot of people don't really
dismiss it.
Yes. So it's start to honor it, and the more you honor it, the more it comes forward. Start, you know, for you, I would start to play with what are some clairs that haven't opened themselves, that you don't totally, they're not the ones at the forefront. So you know what you know. So maybe one, and you know what you feel. So maybe one to play with is, I wonder what I hear. So,
Right.
you know, that would be something fun to play with, because once we're like skilled in
How would
one
you
arena.
play with it? Because I sometimes hear something, just one word or two words, or just out of nowhere. And
I
it's-
wonder what was that?
Yes, and I
Can I hear
wonder,
that again?
and I'm trying to, yeah, that's what I try and do. I try and
I wonder
ask,
what that was.
who are you?
Mhm.
Where are you?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
May I
nice.
be guided to what this message is, and then we can use the rest of our life to unfold that, right? So then you maybe open up a book, it's like, oh, that was that sound I heard 2 days ago, it was this.
Mhm.
So it's when we connect something, we don't always know right away, especially when we're at the beginning of developing a sense more, whether we're at the beginning with any of them or a new one developing a little bit more. It doesn't always have to be in the moment. Sometimes it's something that comes later. We may meet someone who says something. We may be casually shopping for crystals, and then we're sitting in this class. It can be whatever it is, right? But it's
Because it's almost like a little seedling that you just got to sprout, and you've got to help it cultivate.
I love that analogy. Yes, an intuitive nudge is like a seedling that you just have to cultivate. Yep, and
Nurture.
feed it, nurture it.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yep. And the same is true when we have. Oh, so let's talk about something really beautiful. So we have our intuition, which in the moment to moment, noticing, guidance, nudges, all these things. But let's talk about when we have like something really big that wants to be born in us, right? And that will drop in any number of ways. That like comes inside of us through our like little, you know, our tube of insight, like our, you know, Simon calls it the pillar of light. where that energy like flows through us, right? And a lot of people call it things that are similar. But it's that flowing through and that opening a shop or going, you know, these bigger
It's
things.
the knowing you were talking about.
Yes,
earlier.
but it's these knowings that have a greater purpose to them, that they're not just a one and done sort of thing. It is more like what you're talking about, this thing that wants to grow and cultivate into a forest of trees, for example, this grove, rather than just this random little things. Because a lot of things are just, oh, help move us forward. Oh, yep, that's going to be helpful, and that's going to lead me to this. When we start to notice what we're cultivating as a whole, the garden or
It
the
produces
grove
a
of
crop.
trees. Like for me, for you, I look at this, I'm feeling this grove, right? This grove of trees. And like for some of us, it may be, you know, this meadow or whatever it is. It's like, what are our intuition telling us that is growing this grander cultivation of our life that's leading us to like this opus, you know? This is all of these pieces, I think.
So it's like me with the Reiki, knowing that's not my end game. It's like
Yes.
my starting point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's developing, right? And it's seeing how it doesn't mean it's not important. It is. It means it's then there's the next piece, and then there's the next piece, and being able to discern that and working with that and asking, okay, thank you. And that's part of like what's working with the intuition or psychic senses or whatever words you want to use to it. And especially for those of us who start to notice that this is coming up for us to use with other people as well, that there's messages that are, or noticings or awareness. Again, it's intuition is discerning data from the ethers, the data that's all around us. So right now we're in this room and we have our visual senses, we have our, you know, felt senses, we have, you know, the temperature, we can notice the temperature, we can notice that the air is on because we can hear it, we can notice the cars outside, our eyes are telling us there's all these beautiful crystals, there's these humans here, there's all these things. And then if we close our eyes, and let's actually do that right now, if we close our eyes, start to notice how all of a sudden those spidey senses start to turn on, and we're noticing things we didn't notice before, these non-physical awarenesses, right? You can open your eyes if you want. So I like to close my eyes when I'm tuning into something because it helps me turn off the regular human world, the earth world, the, you know, this experience, and it lets me tune into this other piece.
So this is distraction.
It can be. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And we're here to be human on purpose. You know, we're here to be human on purpose. But also, when we want to go deeper, shutting it off and being able to go deeper and to notice the other things. And there's a lot of layers to that. Primarily, let's talk first about being human, noticing, using our spidey senses, our psychic abilities, our intuition in the human realm and sphere, just on this plane, right? And we're noticing that in our life. But then there's using those skills and abilities on other planes as well, and that's something that some of us may be being invited to do as well. You certainly are, right? And you certainly are. And to be able to, and that's the next piece of this intuitive development. So looking, assessing, where am I? You know, not just where am I, like coordinates of where I am in time and space, but where am I in terms of my development? And there isn't hierarchically a better place to be. Like being at the perceived beginning, or there's no one is not hierarchically better than the others. There's no hierarchy. It's just experience. And so noticing when we're starting to look at the non-physical play and the non-physical travel, this is where sometimes people will jump too quick. They don't have a full grasp sometimes of how their intuition and their psychic abilities work on the physical plane and the earthly plane, and then trying to play in the non-physical spheres. This realm is where we can really start to get a grasp of how we perceive things first, and that's going to enhance our ability to discern when we're interacting with like a being that presents itself and says it's so and so. You know, how do you know? I always say, well, do you check ID? And I try and be very polite when it's other practitioners and people who are professionals, because I don't want to say that they don't know what they're doing.
So how do you know that it's safe?
How do you check ID?
Yeah.
So what I really like to do is, this is assuming that you all know yourselves and what your energy feels like. If you do not, that's the very first thing you're going to begin to do, is feel what you feel like. What does my personal energy feel like? what is the sense of it? If I was a color, what color would I be? If I was a sensation, what sensation would I be? If I, all these things, I want to know that I could notice myself anywhere. I know what I feel like, I know my signature. So once you know your signature, that's an aspect of this process of checking ID. The next is, if you're an individual who connects with source in some way, whether it's God, source, or a different God, or whatever, right? Whatever you connect with, do you know would you know that in the dark alone? Do you know what that feels like? Do you know that, you know what I'm saying? So if you have a deep connection of some kind, you know what that is. It's sort of like, for many of us, this is a positive reference. If it's not, you can use a different one. But do you know what your mother feels like? You know what that felt like. So if we had a positive, again, you can use a different, your husband, what is your child, like
Your
someone
puppy
that
dog.
someone who you know that energy, you want to tune into that. Now, for the purposes of checking ID, I don't totally like to use like human people, but you're getting the idea of we're getting the idea of understanding signature. Does that make sense? And so the two primary signatures are yourself and that connection to some kind of source energy of whatever you want to call it. I like it best when it's a long-term relationship that you've had, if it's new to you, because some people don't believe in anything and then start to believe in something, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean that they are void of this particular experience. They are able to cultivate this as well. But those two, and knowing those two signatures, yourself and that source, is really helpful, because what you're going to do when you encounter energies, which this is going really advanced, so please have discernment for yourself and where you're at and where you're playing. Again, like I said, really cultivating your skills and your ability in the human arena first, and getting really solid, and then coming back to this and be like, okay, I'm ready now. So if you're not there yet, but we'll talk about it, because this sometimes can happen with meditators also. A person who meditates for many years, eventually you will encounter energies that are outside of you. Eventually you will encounter beings. It just is the nature of true deep meditation for you. I'm talking about like decades. And that's where you also take the piece into a person who meditates for a long period of time in their day-to-day human world. They might not know their clairs, but they know how to navigate. There's this piece of the navigation, right? There's this connection, because even though there may not be the language to the discernment, they have a discernment, and it's connected to that piece that they've cultivated with knowing themselves through meditation. So we don't always have the language, but so these are all these pieces. So if we are in experience where we're connecting with a being, what we're doing with checking ideas, whom are you? What is your intention? And what are you here for? Like, what is your purpose? And then you check with yourself, does this feel safe? Does this feel necessary? Does this feel like an important connection and interaction? And then you check with your source energy. So source, God, whatever connection. Is this, yes, okay. There's additional ways that you can do that. It's taught a lot of different ways. But you always want to make sure that that feels like a correct connection, that you know what truth feels like in your body. Like, in this lifetime, my name is Alexis. I know that. I can feel that in this lifetime. That's the truth, that in this lifetime, my chosen expression is as this word that you say like this, which is Alexis. And so that means that when I'm connecting then to a being, I can feel that is this a vibration of truth. And just the practice of doing all these things is usually going to weed out things that are not. Because most people aren't checking ID. Most people are just, oh yeah, there's this thing. I think we're okay.
They usually do that.
So with our checking of ID,
Hello, are we having
Katie Lake.
Happy birthday. Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Hi, Tina.
How are
I'm
you?
doing good.
Good to see you.
Sorry.
oh, that's okay. We're doing a class. Yeah, you're fine.
Just going over to there. See ya.
So you unlock it.
Do you want me to wait for you? So yeah, that was a great question, because it is something that's important as we start to play with things or have experiences, because not all of us are going seeking it out. It comes to us and it's like, oh, this is in front of me now. What do I do? You know? But it always is gonna come back to the very beginning, which is what we talked about, which is developing and hearing and understanding and trusting and following, right?
That's why I asked, because certain things happened to me as a small child,
Mm-hmm.
like leaving my body,
Yeah.
and then proving to myself that I did it over and over and over and over again. But the last time I did it, it was like I told myself I was going to, is that what I'm really doing? And I told myself I was going to look and see before I went back into my body, and I did. And I never really did it again because I was afraid, because I'd go so far, and it was just right outside my street, and going down my street, and the neighbor's dog would bark at me, and I started swimming, you know, at first, but then I was able to get up really high and go faster and like that. But I would only go so far because I was afraid if I continued, I wouldn't be able to get back.
Yeah.
Then I realized what I was doing, and then I didn't do it anymore
Yeah.
because I was afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a young girl, so I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I didn't ever talk to anybody about it, ever, until I was an adult. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, that's a whole side conversation, right, about a connection with children and being able to have children know that it's safe to share their experiences and all of that. And the more that we hold that, the more that is a ripple effect. So whether or not you're around children or not, just you holding that experience of it's safe for children to talk about their experiences, it does have a ripple effect on our world, you know, on this earth, and it's really powerful. And being able to, that is really common, our fear will block us from being able to do things. This is why I always like to ask, is this safe and is this necessary? Especially when you're talking about, you know, for a long time there was this concept of seekers, spiritual seekers, people that were out actively looking, you know, and I actually feel it's a little bit different. I think it's those spiritually activated. Again, not hierarchically. This doesn't mean that we are chosen. It's garbage. That's not it at all, right? But it's more this idea that a lot of people, there's a little bit of reluctance sometimes. It's not that we're seeking, it's that we're seeking answers and language to the experiences we're having because of whom we came here to be, right? And that's a lot of times what it is. Why are we activated to do the things we do? And a lot of times it's because we incarnated on purpose in order to do the things that we're doing to help other people that perhaps, you know. And so asking these questions around, how do I perceive the world, you know, and also that, again, that safety piece, where we're a lot of times we're having experiences. We're not going around saying, I never occurred to me that I was going to channel and have a modality that, you know, eventually thousands of people will share. That wasn't what I wasn't seeking that. That was not something that was sought after, to, you know, it just wasn't. Now, have I also noticed that people have these little seeds inside of them as little children, even of what our understandings would be and how we'll come? Sure, right? But when we're in our development phases, which we all are now, we'll have experiences come to us. And when we have experiences come to us, asking the questions of, is this safe and is this necessary? And tuning into what, again, our tensile strength, our pillar of light, what do I feel like? What does source feel like? Is this a safe thing? Is this something that's necessary for my spiritual development? And the reason I share that is because I have had, not giving medical advice, I have had seizures and different sorts of physical experiences. I once had kriyas, which are movements, for 30 minutes that I did not create. I was not causing my body to move. Where right now I want my hands to do this, so they are, which is very different than when your hand moves on its own. When it's energetically moved, that's different. When you're having, you know, nervous system experiences, many times spiritual experiences are related with the nervous system, because the nervous system is that most heightened piece. You know, it's conducting electricity, and energy is electricity essentially, right? So it's coming in. So this is where there's things behind that. There's reasons why that's occurring. And so it's helping us have this understanding of, again, when we say these things and we know, for me, that's what helped me. Is this necessary? Is this safe? You know, is this part of my growth? And honestly, I think it's something that's really helpful for us even in mundane life experiences, because sometimes life as a human being is really hard. And even when we use our intuition, and maybe especially when we use our intuition, we may feel like we failed ourselves, or our beliefs have failed us, or our intuition has failed us if life externally doesn't look the way that we think it ought to, or the mind, you know, there's those pieces sometimes. Not everything goes the way we would like it to, and our mind wants to put meaning to things. So it's asking, you know, is this something that's part of my experience? Show me what this is for? May I see this? Even if I have to be in this, may I see what it is? That's all part of that intuitive development. Like, it's not just about this cool thing of being able to psychically know what you're thinking. Like, I think that's cool and it can be but that's not really what it's about. It's about me, you know, you knowing that this shop to come here today and to chat and to talk and to stay, it's these pieces, right? Like, why this sort of thing? And to me, that's more important than the performative things. Now, sometimes performative is important because it helps show proof. Why do I channel publicly? Is it a performance? In a way, because it's putting something on for people to view. Is it made up? No. But is it important to then show? Right? Yeah, because it helps. Number one, a couple of reasons for that. One, it's actual information and messages that are helpful for people. Number two, Simon, I don't think, would be too cool with me experiencing life without us both doing it together, because that's what we do. And then three, there's also the piece around people seeing the possibility, right? And of the importance of that. Whereas whatever we're doing, however we're using our intuition, what is the purpose of that use of that intuition? Right, to guide us. And again, we're coming back to like understanding our clairs, understanding, you know, what is the data that's coming through and discerning it and doing that with beauty. Yeah. That's what I have.
I love it.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions or thoughts? Yeah. Okay. Do we have some time to do the meditation? Okay. So what we'll do is
I'm probably gonna have to leave.
That's perfectly fine. Yeah.
I've got my husband.
Well, thank you so much for staying.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Alexa
Mhm.
and
Sandy.
Tina.
and Tina.
Yes.
Thank you.
And what was your name?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And if
We'll
you
come
get
back,
with
Elizabeth.
Danny, we can send you the link to the rest of the last part of this if you'd like
Oh,
the
yeah,
recording.
connected. You don't have my email. I don't think so. No.
Well, you know where she is.
I know where you are. Come see me.
Yes.
I will.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye, Elizabeth.
Thank you. I'll sit there.
Oh, and I'll sit.